In December 2025, a cultural phenomenon reached its conclusion. After nearly a decade on screen, the Hawkins crew fought their final battle against Vecna, sealing the abyss, the dark dimensional tear that birthed the Upside Down, and bringing the supernatural nightmare to an end. It delivered the resolution fans had been holding out for since the Snowball Dance in 1984. The surviving characters, battered and exhausted, finally found a moment of genuine, lasting peace. However, while we watched a group of 1980s teenagers win a seemingly modern war, the actual timeline of this tragedy spans much further back. The inciting incident of this story did not occur with Will Byers vanishing into the Upside Down on a November night in 1983. To grasp the true scale of the Hawkins anomaly, we have to rewind the clock 40 years, back to a secret World War II military experiment that ended up dooming 3 generations. In 1943, the United States Navy initiated Project Rainbow, also known as the Philadelphia Experiment. It was a classified military operation attempting to generate a cloak of invisibility around warships to protect them from enemy radar. The test failed. Instead of bending light or radar around the hull, the equipment tore a hole in spacetime, transporting the ship and its crew directly into a hostile, uncharted realm known as Dimension X. Only one man survived the immediate slaughter by the creatures waiting inside. That sailor returned to the real world with heavily tainted blood and a dying confession for his son, a young Martin Brenner. Driven by his father's final words, Brenner and a team of scientists spent the 1950s trying to replicate that portal. They launched the Nevada experiment, detonating massive amounts of energy in the desert to pry the door to Dimension X back open. During one of these tests, a local boy named Henry Creel was playing near a cache of stolen laboratory equipment. The machinery activated, pulling him into the anomaly, where he made first contact with the Mind Flayer particles. The Mind Flayer is a swirling mass of sentient, airborne particles native to that dimension. He survived and returned to our world carrying a localized mutation that would eventually act as a biological bridge for the supernatural to cross over. By 1959, Henry's behavior had deteriorated so much that his parents relocated the family to Hawkins, Indiana, hoping the quiet, idyllic suburb would cure him. The infamous Creel House murders originated entirely from the violent manifestation of Henry's abilities, resulting in the brutal deaths of his mother and sister. Dr. Brenner quickly intervened, faking Henry's death and taking him into the newly established Hawkins National Laboratory. Brenner branded him 001 and began using Henry's altered blood to initiate MK-Ultra. MK-Ultra was a covert CIA program that subjected unwitting human subjects to mind control and sensory deprivation experiments. Brenner spent 20 years trying to control the children born from this program. That effort collapsed on September 8, 1979, when Henry manipulated a young test subject named 11 into removing his power inhibitor. Henry slaughtered the lab's staff and children, forcing 11 to forcefully banish him back through a gate into Dimension X. This diagram illustrates what happened next. Trapped back in the wasteland, Henry survived by using his abilities to command the raw material of the realm, reorganizing the scattered particles of the Mind Flayer into a massive, interconnected hive mind structure under his direct control. The creatures that would eventually terrorize Hawkins originated as man-made weapons, forged by decades of government hubris and molded by a single sociopath. When 11 made contact with a Demogorgon in the psychic void in 1983, she essentially reopened the door to a 40-year Cold War that had been brewing since the Navy's first failed experiment. The ensuing battles extracted a brutal human cost. Innocent townspeople who had absolutely nothing to do with Project Rainbow, from Radio Shack manager Bob Newby to high school outcast Eddie Munson, were killed in the crossfire. This graphic shows how that damage became permanent. Even after a victim was rescued, the physical trauma left behind a condition called true sight. True sight is an acquired psychic link that forces the victim to see the Upside Down. Henry used this connection as a parasitic tether to Hawkins, weaponizing their lingering psychological trauma to scout the Tan and prepare attacks. The children of Hawkins tried to build normal lives inside this war zone. They spent the summer of 1985 working at the newly built Starcourt Mall, grasping at movie screenings and ice cream jobs, while Soviet operatives and flesh monsters quietly amassed power right beneath their feet. Looked at chronologically, the first 4 seasons of the story act as a prolonged and desperate trauma response. A group of innocent kids were left to manage the horrific physical fallout of mid-century adult experiments. The destruction of Vecna's physical form in the series finale effectively closed a historical loop that had been widening since 1943. By saving their small Indiana town from a monster, they actively dismantled the toxic, classified legacy of Project Rainbow, the Nevada tests, and the MK Ultra program. Through sheer endurance, they broke a cycle of supernatural and institutional corruption that had been set into motion decades before any of them were even born. The survivors did not walk away with superpowers, nor did they become lifelong soldiers. The true prize they fought for was the right to put down their weapons and be normal kids again. Stranger Things functions as a story about a discarded generation forced to reconcile the hidden sins of their parents and surviving long enough to claim the right to their own future.